Hi, this is Eric from Longbox Review at longboxreview.wordpress.com. Today I have a very special guest on the show with me. It's Bruce Leslie from the Heroes and Villains podcast. Say hi, Bruce.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
And I wanted to have Bruce on because he has been so gracious to invite me onto his podcast, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And you can look those up at heroesandvillains.libsyn.com. And the latest episode that we just recorded right before I started recording this episode should be out probably before this episode comes out. So you'll be able to go listen to that and download it if you're not familiar with the show. So Bruce, why don't you just kind of tell everybody what the Heroes and Villains podcast is all about?
Well, first I want to say you were on 4 times if we count the Christmas show. So
that's
I'm
right.
I'm going to give you credit for 4 there. But Heroes and Villains, 99% of the time I shouldn't say 99. I'll say 95% of the time. What I do is I pick one character, almost always from comic books, though I have ventured out just a little bit from time to time. And we just talk for an hour or so about that character. We describe everything. We talk about their first appearance, who created them, what their powers are, what their weaknesses are, what they look like, their origin story, who their friends and enemies are, and what characters influence them, and vice versa. Talk about their other appearances. I mean, that's pretty much the show. We make recommendations at the end on what people can read or whatever to get to know that character better. And I really felt like that was something that nobody else was doing, and I just wanted to pick one character and just dive into it as deeply as I could every week. And there are just so many characters out there. I mean, I would be 150 years old before I ran out of characters to cover, so it just seemed like a good idea. And at first they were shorter episodes and I did them by myself, but as I started to see that more and more people were listening, I've tried to have guests on as much as possible. I still do an occasion, but I always enjoy it more when I've got somebody to talk to, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. That's precisely the reason I love to do this too, is and have people on. It's so much nicer to have a conversation with someone than just to be talking at my computer monitor, with a microphone in front of my face. I enjoy talking about the stuff I do, but it's so much better when I can interact with someone and we have a conversation and just see where that goes, right? So that's what
Absolutely.
that's what we're going to do here today. So you already answered a bunch of the questions I was going to ask you, Bruce, with that introduction. So you started this, I'm guessing January 2013-ish. Is that right?
Yes,
okay.
January 2013. It was a New Year's resolution to start a podcast, and that's when this all came around. I think my first episode was about the last week of January.
Yeah. So what you said the New Year's resolution. So
yes.
Why? What prompted you to, instead of, say losing 15 pounds that year, as most people do for their resolutions, you decided to do a podcast? That's not something that most people think of when they are making their New Year's resolutions. So why did you decide to do a podcast?
Well, I've been listening to podcasts for a couple of years there. I can still remember when I first stumbled across it. It was just a way to listen to radio shows that were local shows in other markets where I used to live, and they weren't on the air where I was living at the time. And then once I sort of got into the iTunes library for podcasts, I started to find that there was almost anything you could think of. There was a podcast for it, and comic books were always an interest of mine, superheroes and comic books and the like. So I started listening to several different comic book podcasts, geek culture podcasts and things like that. And I would find myself like talking back to the iPod. This was even before I had the podcast on my telephone, so I was still using an iPod to listen to them, and I was talking back and I was interjecting, and I always had like thoughts like, man, I've got something to say about that. Nobody to hear it. I look like a crazy person walking at the park just shouting, shouting something like Sinestro, that's who you're trying to think of. Hal Sinestro. But anyway, people just assumed that I was deeply disturbed and they maybe wanted to offer me a sandwich or something. But I decided I really would like to do this. And I wasn't a terribly tech savvy person at the time. I'm still not terribly tech savvy. So I was a little bit intimidated by it. But, the more I thought about it, there was nothing stopping me from doing it. Some people that I didn't really know well, but I was acquainted with, they had some podcasts, and I started thinking, well, if these schleps can do it, I know that I can do it.
There you go.
but it was one of those things that I just had to force myself to do. I had to kick myself in the backside and actually do it. So that's where the New Year's resolution and a deadline and all that kind of thing came along. And I'm not lying to you here. I actually bought a book called Podcasting for Dummies. And it told me, how to set up the Libsyn account and how to record your voice into a computer. I mean, something as simple as that. There are always the little voice recorder programs, but those aren't very convenient for podcasting. So I learned about things like Audacity and GarageBand and the like. And then editing. I mean, I'll be honest, I really didn't edit my first few shows. I had to figure out how to do that. And my first sort of attempts at podcasting, which weren't the heroes and villains, but just kind of like little test blurbs that I did where I read some news or something and recorded it. And I didn't even know how to get an RSS feed at the time. So I just uploaded audio only to YouTube. So if you clicked on YouTube, there was just a picture of the GarageBand icon like you'd have on your desktop on an Apple computer and my voice for like 10 minutes.
Wow.
And, almost 17 people looked at that. So later on, like I said, the book told me how to get an RSS feed, how to submit it to iTunes, and then Google searches will help with a lot of the questions. And then it's like any other interest you have. Once you get into it, you start learning a lot more than you could learn if you weren't into it. Just by doing it, you pick up things. And then obviously talking to other podcasters like you, especially some of those early shows, I would always ask people, what kind of microphone do you use? How do you record? What do you do? This, that, and the other. So you just learn a lot going along. I did an episode of a friend's podcast. It was all about podcasting, essentially, like how to start up a podcast. And I my biggest advice was just do it. You're going to learn so much more. You can't ever be prepared to do it until you've already done it a few times. I don't know. It's like trying to read a book about riding a bike to learn to ride a bike. You just got to get on it and fall down and skin your knee a few times.
Yeah. Very true. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So yeah, you earlier we mentioned when you're listening to these podcasts and you're talking back, of course, to them that they can't hear you. I did the same exact thing, Bruce. This whole thing. I started listening to comic book related podcasts back in I think the first half of 2006 is when I first got into it, and I was listening to the Comic Geek Speak podcast. I don't know if you listened to that one.
I don't listen to it, but I've actually met those guys a couple times.
Yeah.
Nice guys.
Yeah, they are. But I listen to them, and it's just they're a bunch of friends that have comic book history together, right? And so it was just really cool to listen to that camaraderie and the back and forth, and they tease each other. They're just friends getting together with a microphone in between them and just talking comics, which reminded me of my early days in comics. I had a few very good friends, and they were also into comics. And I've had both of those friends on the show, Travis and Greg. Travis more often than Greg, but I didn't get into doing or having a co-host until I think it was episode, I want to say 4. Might have been. Yes. It might have been 6. My memory is a bit fuzzy on that, but I had Travis on for the first time, and that's like I said, that's where I knew that was what was missing from my podcast, was that I need to have someone on here to talk to and not just talk at the people that that are listening to the show. So it's nice to hear that other people have a similar experience or outlook on podcasting, and I totally agree with you, Bruce. It's if you're ever people out there listening to this, if you're thinking I could do a much better job at this than Eric. And yes, you could. You should do it. Just jump in, feet first. There, like Bruce said, there's books out there. I actually got a different book, Bruce, and I contemplated doing my own podcast for, I think, a year before I actually just turned the microphone on and started recording. And the whole RSS thing for me too came later. Yes. But there are resources out there. It doesn't really matter what your equipment is, your hardware, your microphone and stuff like that. At first, just do it. We have laptops now with built-in microphones and recording software already there. People could just use that and just to get started. However, I do highly recommend the ATR 2100 microphone, because I got that recently, Bruce, and it's been a godsend in terms of how my horrible voice sounds on the podcast now. It sounds much better because of that microphone.
And that's a USB microphone, right? I mean, it's like I use. You just plug it in. That was another thing. It was the hardware. I had been to cons where the GeekSpeak guys, the Comic GeekSpeak guys were, and they had a mixer and Shure microphones that are, this is an expensive setup. So I was intimidated by that. And then I read, you can buy really nice microphones that just USB mics. You just plug it into the side of your computer and it automatically starts working. It's like magic, some kind of mystical magic. You don't have to know how it works. You just have to be able to find the USB port and you're good to go.
Yeah, and the ATR, we're getting into really geeky podcasty stuff here, but the ATR is really good because you can also it's an XLR, it has an XLR connector. So if I did
see, that's beautiful.
Yeah, if I did get a mixer and start be more professional in my setup, then I could do that with this microphone. So it's really cool.
Yeah, once again, geeky microphone talk, but I use a Blue Yeti.
Oh yeah.
And after I purchased the Blue Yeti and was using it for a while, I saw the Blue Yeti Pro, which has both the USB and XLR connection for about the same money. And I was really disappointed I didn't go ahead and get the Yeti Pro because, I'm 3 USB mics in and I've spent enough money on the USB mics. I could have bought like a really nice XLR mic and a mixer at this point, but I don't know that I have the desk space for all that.
Yeah. And one more really geeky thing before we move on to other topics. I know that there's a way, because you and I both use Skype to record when we have guests on. I know that there's a way to do what they call a mix minus setup if you have what was the thing we were talking about? Mixer.
A mixer?
Yeah, jeez. If you have a mixer, you can hook things up via Skype into the mixer to do a mix minus thing, and that way you can get your co-hosts, and I meant that plural. You can have multiple people come in via Skype and have them all on their own channel.
See, that's a little over my head there, but it sounds like a wonderful way to do it.
Yeah, mine too. I haven't figured it out yet. How exactly to do it, but I eventually I may do that, especially if I want to have more than a few people on the podcast, which I tried once before, and I think it has more to do with my connection, my internet connection, than anything else. But the signal coming in and my signal going out, I couldn't handle more than one co-host, which is really unfortunate.
And we promise we will talk comics.
Yes.
This isn't purely podcasting. But one last comment. A friend of mine who is the host of his own podcast has a background as a sound engineer for broadcast radio. And something that he told me that I'm excited about is there's a lot of virtual mixer software that's going to be available soon so that you don't have to have the actual hardware and you can still do all those things.
Ooh.
Which kind of excited about that, too.
Yeah. Bruce, would you mind letting me know when you get that information? That sounds wonderful.
I'll let you know when I get it, but it could also be like some of those movies that are always in pre-production, but they never hit the theaters. I don't know.
Yeah. So is this person that you just mentioned, is he involved with the Omega Nerds Network that you're part of?
Yes, it's Joe who hosts the Geeky Faucet podcast, and you'll if you listen to it, it's got great production values, wide array of topics, but the shows don't come out very often, which I wish he had more of them. But he's such a perfectionist; it makes it difficult for him to get them out there as often as me. You listen to the episode we just recorded, and you won't hear a lot of cuts in there. So I pretty much just slap a theme music on the beginning and a outro at the end, maybe a little break in the middle, and then I just give it to the world to judge me.
Oh, I'm so jealous. I wish I could do that, Bruce. I'm not a very good broadcaster in that I do ums and I all the stuff you're not supposed to do when you're talking, doing public speaking. And so I end up having to so I'll record an episode. So as we're recording this, Bruce, I will after we're done, I will go back and I will listen to the entire thing all over again and cut out stuff that shouldn't be there and tighten things up a little bit, and if there's any awkward pauses and all that kind of stuff. So I end up doing the same amount of work, as we're talking again, and probably a little bit more in the post production, just so that things sound good and I don't sound even worse than I normally do. So
I used to spend probably 2 hours editing for every hour recording.
Yeah.
But after a while, and I do a weekly show. I haven't missed a week yet in a year and a half. So now my rule is no profanity, no editing. As long as I don't have to bleep something
Yeah,
out or
that's
cut
true.
something out, then I pretty much just let it go through unless there's just something just obviously wrong that I have to straighten up.
Okay, so weekly show, you said a year and a half?
68 weeks, whatever that
Wow.
works out to.
How do you manage that? Because I can barely do every 2 weeks a show.
Well, it causes a little bit of strain in the home life sometimes, my dedication to the podcasting. And that's sometimes where those solo episodes that I still do will come into play where I need flexibility. If we're going on vacation, I'll do a show with the guest and then I'll do a solo episode the same day. And then I've got 2 weeks worth of shows. And I have done lots of panicked scheduling in order to get my shows out on time. And then I have those that are sort of locked in the vault that I can release if something unexpected would come up, like my death, I guess.
Oh,
I know I've got at least 2 more weeks of the show if I
God
would drop
forbid.
it today. So yeah, but no, I do have a couple shows left in the vault in case of emergencies. But yeah, there have been times when I thought I was going to miss a week, but I still haven't done that yet. Eventually I will. I mean, it's unavoidable, but so far I've got a nice little streak going.
Yeah, I would say so. That's very impressive. Like I said, I have trouble. I really try hard to keep to a biweekly schedule, but this month, April, I mean, I think by the time this comes out, it'll probably be the beginning of May. But April, for some reason, like I mentioned this a couple times now on the show and on the YouTube channel, but I've been sick for about a month, and I just didn't have the energy or the voice even to get into it, and so I just took the time off and tried to be okay with it. But it's really hard because I feel that pull to come, to get behind the microphone and talk comics, because this is stuff that I love.
Yes.
So with this episode, I think I'll be back on schedule. So I'm very excited, and hopefully I'll look towards you, Bruce, as a
Lots of chicken noodle soup and orange juice too. That helps.
Oh, yeah, that's very true. Okay, well, let's move on then. So I just want to talk briefly about Omega Nerds. So when you first started this, you weren't part of that network. Is that correct?
That is correct. When I first started this, I had some grand ideas of starting my own network. It was I would put out a bunch of different shows. And then when I saw just how tough it was to get one show out every week, that dream quickly was shattered.
I was going to say, how could you ever do that?
Yeah, I thought, well, maybe I would just quit my job and my family and I would live in abject poverty with our only possessions being a USB mic and a laptop. But that did not last. I tried to do like 4 shows one week, and then I realized this is not going to happen. So I just did my solo thing and made some friends along the way. That's one thing I like about my podcast is it's very inviting to other people to be a guest, because you can kind of pick the topic and you got time to prepare. I usually give folks a week or 2 to prepare so that they're not caught off guard. But and I meet a lot of people that way. And some of the people that I met were in a similar situation to me. They had independent podcasts that had a small but loyal group of listeners, and we pulled our resources together. Then we would all maybe have a few more listeners. And the guy who came up with the idea to form a network is a guy who has the Nerds Domain podcast. And he actually puts out 2 podcasts, but they don't necessarily come out every week. So he had 2 podcasts, and then me and 2 other guys he asked to join. So it was a total of 5 podcasts now on the network. And they're all sort of nerd, geek culture related, but they're not all comic book podcasts by any means. There's a lot of gaming, a lot of movies. This one show called When Nerds Collide has a lot of everything. You never know what they're going to cover from one week to the next, which makes it a lot of fun. And I don't know. I'm not sure if it's made much of a difference here. I guess 6 months later, but at least we're all still helping each other out with technical advice and things like that.
Well, but that must be nice though, to have that resource. And so you're up to episode 68. That's the one that I'll be on.
Just recorded. Yes.
Yeah. So 68 episodes. But I noticed in your feed that you don't have the first, four?
The first three were some of those very early episodes when I didn't really know what I was doing, and those are the ones that I locked in the vault, so to speak. I took them down off the feed, and 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, I released episode 66 was my very first episode, and I thought it'd be interesting. I put a new intro into it, then I just released that original episode, and then I put a new sort of outro on the end of it. But if you go look on my feed, I think it's episode 66. It says "From the Vault, Mandrake the Magician," and that was my New Year's resolution episode. That was the very first one. Yeah,
I thought that I saw that just the other day as I was preparing for this episode, and I saw that you're rebroadcasting it, and I listened to it not too long ago. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. And so because I had a very similar experience, right? So when I first started doing this, I put out 3-4 episodes where I just started talking about some comics and not knowing anything, and my first microphone was one of those headset mics, that you would would use for Skype, and that's it. And I didn't know anything about levels, and I used Audacity from day one because that was free, and I was trying to do it on the cheap. I've since put in a little bit of money since then, but yeah, those first episodes are really difficult for me to listen to.
And not only the technical components, but I didn't really know yet, so I'm kind of rambling a little bit.
Yep.
And the roots are there for the format I use now, but I know when I listened back to it, there's one part where I said universalism is the genesis of creativity, and I have no idea what that statement means. I think I was just like at a loss for words, and I wanted to sound smart. And I would listen back, and I still have no idea what universalism is the genesis of creativity means. I don't know what those three words alone. I know what they mean, but you put them together, and they don't make sense to me.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was a really cool idea, though, of what you did, where you go back to that first episode, re-release it, because I think you didn't you say you put a little bit of effort into the audio and maybe improving it a little bit too.
I mean, I ran it through Levelator.
Yeah.
I did some things like that to make it a little more even. If you listen to the raw audio, it almost sounds like one of those X-wing fighter comms from Star Wars, from the original Star Wars. So I did try to shine it up a little bit, but it still has the raw sound to it.
Yeah, I actually did a very similar thing on those first, I don't know, 6 or 10 episodes when I moved over to Libsyn as my podcast host. I was on a different podcast host, and things didn't work out there, and I knew Libsyn was kind of like the de facto or the default podcast host in terms of quality and price and all that kind of stuff. So I finally made the plunge and moved over to them, and I took that opportunity to, as you said, spruce up my my first few episodes. So I hope they sound better. So let's see here. So let's move into the more comic book realm. So your show is about heroes and villains from mostly from comic books, others from just popular culture in general. But obviously you have an interest in, or maybe you could say a love of these comic book characters. So, what's your origin story, Bruce? Where have you come from in terms of, comic book fandom, and what are you interested in now and all that kind of stuff?
Well, it all starts with the Super Friends. I mean, anytime I get the chance to mention to people that my love of superheroes comes from the Super Friends, I do that. And growing up, that Hanna-Barbera show that came on every Saturday morning was my absolute favorite show. I've watched every incarnation of it. I never outgrew it. I've got some of them on DVD, and it's a little harder to watch as an adult, but just the nostalgia keeps me going. And then the first live action television shows I remember watching were The Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby and Wonder Woman with Linda Carter. I loved the Spider-Man segment on the Electric Company for people who ever watched that.
That was great.
From a very early age, that just captured my mind. I can still remember going to the theater to see the original Superman movie, the Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve Superman movie. and that, I was hooked early on. Got a little bit older and started to sort of drift away from that as Super Friends was not on television anymore. There weren't a whole lot of superhero things going on. The Tim Burton Batman movie came out and it hit everybody real hard and got us back in. But as far as actually reading comic books, probably sixth grade or so. I mean, I had dabbled in comic books before. A snow day at school and I had to go to work with my mom. She'd take me to the drugstore and I'd go to the spinner rack and I'd buy whatever I wanted to get there. I got, Sergeant Rock was one of my early favorites because I liked war stories and things like that. I also liked silly things like Peter Porker, the Spectacular Spider Ham. That was one of my early favorites.
Yeah.
And then when I started to get early adolescence or pre-adolescence, X-Men captured my imagination just like it did everyone's. And I was there, for the Morlock massacres. And then I was around when the New Mutants first came into play because I stuck with the X-Men for a long time. And I was picking up some other Marvel titles. I got the first Secret Wars was one of the first big event books that I ever followed. Wasn't one of the first. It really was the first big event book that I followed. And Spider-Man was on the War World, and he came out with that black and white suit.
Mm-hmm.
I had that issue, and I remember that one dearly. And my mother, God rest her soul, saw fit to shred it or feed it to pigeons or something. So I don't have that anymore. But that was one of my prized possessions back then. I just kind of stopped reading DC and it was all about Marvel. And then when the 90s hit and comic book speculation led to some ridiculousness with what was going on with comic books overprinting and 50 variant covers, and the story seemed to be not important. It became just about the art, and then the art got to be a little too extreme. I sort of dropped out of comics for a little bit, as most people did. I mean, you're going to hear this story from a lot of different folks. And then, when I was a little bit older, I went back and read some comics that I wasn't necessarily either old enough or aware of the first time around. And that's when I, in my, I don't know, maybe my college years, I discovered Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns and, these iconic graphic novels that are part of the comic book readers canon the world over. And that's when I started probably becoming more of a DC fan than a Marvel fan, as I got older. DC appealed to me when I was very young and very old, and then during adolescence, Marvel appealed to me. And of course, now I appreciate the medium, and I read, stuff from Image, DC, Marvel, Dynamite, Boom. There's not a major publisher out there that I don't find things that I like, but it's just interesting how when I'm very young and when I'm very old, I like things maybe a little more clearly defined. And then, of course, during adolescence, who doesn't like the X-Men?
Yeah.
But, of course, the same writers that write for Marvel are the writers that write for DC, that write for Image. I mean, it's all the same guys. There's something about the nostalgia you get with DC is different than the nostalgia you get with Marvel.
Yeah.
And it's the older I got, the harder it got to find people to connect with over comic books. And then all of a sudden we're sort of having a silver age here, a silver age of readership. The speculation of the 90s kind of caused a crash, much like the post-World War II sensibilities in the comics code caused a crash back in the 50s. And now it's conventions are bigger than ever, thanks to things like the internet. All of my closest comic book friends live miles and miles away. I don't know how many folks I communicate with and stay in touch with that live on the West Coast, or at least in the Pacific time zone like yourself, whereas I'm, way over here in West Virginia. It's just exciting time for comic book readers, and you've got Comixology. Even if you live in a rural place where you can't get to the comic book store, you've got Amazon where you can order anything if you want to actually hold the paper in your hand. It's just a good time, and I'm glad that I pounced on that a few years back to really get into it again.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That you're right. That is a very familiar story. I see a lot of people either writing about it on the internet or talking about it on podcasts where they started young, and then for one reason or another they got out of comics, and then they got back into comics, and so yeah, that's something that actually I never really did get out of comics, which probably says a lot about my adolescent years, but but it was just, even though I was still reading comics throughout my college years, it was really few and far between. There weren't that many titles that I was getting. It's only been in the more recent years that, one, I could afford more, and two, there's just the independents, especially. There's just a lot of content out there to choose from.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so easy to get that it becomes so overwhelming. It's like if you have 7 choices, it's easy to pick 5, but when you have 100 choices, it's so hard to pick 5, so you just don't pick any.
Yeah, that's true. Not to mention, the renaissance of, so to speak, of the superhero movies that are out these days. Now it doesn't quite translate, the popularity of, like say the Avengers movie or more recently Captain America, the Winter Soldier, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that, or doesn't necessarily place people into the comic book shops to sell more comics, but the whole concept, the whole genre is elevated to a degree that, I wouldn't, growing up reading comics as I did, I never would have thought that this would have happened ever. I wished for it. I wanted it. I don't know how many conversations I had with my buddies, Travis and Greg, and other people too, growing up, where, how cool would this be if they could make a movie out of this? And they're doing it now.
Right. And I'll say that I think that the desire and the ambition was always there. We just didn't ever have the technology like we do now. I mean, oh, geez, the old Captain America made for television movies, they were pretty bad. The Incredible Hulk is actually good because they adapted to fit within the technology that they had. But, the old Captain Marvel Shazam live action show that came on, that was pretty bad. But they were trying to do it. They couldn't, they didn't have the budgets or the CGI technology that we have now, and they just couldn't do it right. I mean, that's what makes Superman such an anomaly. I mean, the fact that you would believe a man could fly was their whole tagline. And I think this would have happened 20 years ago or 30 years ago if the technology was there 30 years ago. And thank goodness we're at a time where they can do it, but I'm just afraid they're doing maybe a little too much, a little too soon. And it's going to be like the 90s in comics is going to happen, in the 2020s in movies.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. I think so. I mean, right now, the whole Marvel Studios thing, everyone's real excited about it still, even though how many movies did they come out with now? There's 3 Iron Man, 2 Captain America, 2 Thor, Avengers.
And if you count the Hulk, one of the Hulks is in the Marvel Studios thing, so that's a lot.
Yeah, that's
a lot.
And so it'll culminate in the next, the next Avengers. They'll come out with, Guardians of the Galaxy is the next one up, I think.
Yes, Guardians of the Galaxy's up, and then Avengers 2, and I don't know. They're going to have
3. Cap 3 will be out at the same time that they're going to do the Man of Steel sequel. So what I'm thinking is that there's still this excitement about the Marvel Studios movies because of the way that they've approached it and tying everything together.
And honestly, they've done a good job. I mean, they've done a good job. Yeah. That's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm. But what I'm curious about is, so Warner Brothers with the DC stuff are finally getting their act together to get stuff out, but I'm wondering if, just the competition of it, the direction, the different visions, they're going to have different visions because they're different companies and different characters and whatnot. But what I'm wondering about is that clash or the appearance of a clash to the audience may turn some people off. I don't know.
Yeah,
I could be off in the weeds with that one.
And I'm a little worried too because Warner Brothers, I'm afraid they're going to try too hard to imitate Marvel rather than just do what they do so well. And they don't have to come up with 2 movies a year or 3 movies a year or 4 movies a year really if you count Sony and Fox that Marvel's doing. They need to stick to doing what they do well, and they do the landmark movies. I mean, that original Superman is probably the most historically significant superhero movie ever made. And actually, episode 62, I think it was, I did nothing but talk about superhero movies. And then The Dark Knight is probably the highest quality as far as, cinema, film critics that know about film, which I'm not one of those. I mean, people really think of all the comic book related films ever made, that maybe The Dark Knight's the one that's been done best. So they do it really good if they do it right. They really shouldn't try this Marvel model of cranking out a bunch, because that's just not what they've been able to do. And I'm worried they're already trying to turn this Superman 2 into the Justice League movie.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Avengers didn't come out until 7-8 years after Iron Man. I
Hmm.
mean, they took their time building to it, and they did it right.
Right.
And Warner Brothers, I'm worried they're trying to take shortcuts.
Uh-huh.
And what's going to happen is we're never going to get that next Dark Knight. Even Tim
Yep.
Burton's Batman, though it doesn't hold up so well, the cultural significance of that film can't be understated. I mean, it was huge. So they're good at doing big on occasion, whereas Marvel's good at giving you consistency. It's like the difference between, American beers. A lot of people who are beer drinkers might put down American beers, but you know what you're going to get. It's consistent, and it outsells all the European stuff. The European stuff is harder to come by, but it's better. So, Warner maybe needs to be the microbrew
Yeah.
and let Marvel be, Miller Lite or Budweiser or whatever.
That's a great analogy. Okay. So I wanted to go back to something, or touch back on something that you were talking about. So you said that you started out as a DC fan, and you kind of gravitated more towards Marvel, but then you returned to the DC fold. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So what were your I guess favorite books from DC at the beginning that you were reading when you were younger?
Oh, Justice League. It was Justice League and Sergeant Rock. That was a DC title, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the two. What I liked from Marvel when I was younger was licensed stuff. I think Marvel put out the early Star Wars comics.
Yes. Yeah.
Stuff that I didn't really identify with the Marvel universe so much as what I was reading then. But Superman. When you're a younger kid, Superman just has that appeal. Batman has that appeal. Justice League was Super Friends on paper at that point in time. I think they even worked Marvin and Wendy into the Justice League at some point. So that's what I was reading when I was first reading DC. And then, when I went over to Marvel, like I said, it was mainly X-Men, but, you get a little spillover into Spider-Man and X Factor, which is a spinoff of X-Men. Got some spillover into Daredevil, but mainly X-Men. And then when I went back to DC again as an older person, it was trades. I was going back to the stuff that I missed the first time around. Like I said, I went back and found Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, and I found Watchmen and stuff like that. And Crisis on Infinite Earths was a big major event, so I did kind of follow that. But as I was older, I kind of went back and started to notice that a lot of things had happened that I wasn't aware of, because I was off following a different path, I guess, at the time. And a part of why I probably returned to DC when I got back into comics is, and this may not be fair, but I sort of blamed Marvel a little bit more than DC for the extreme era in comics and the speculation and some of the names that you associate with those early days of Image that weren't like the days we have now with Image, but people that were talented artists, but you just associate them with the all style and no substance that was going on at the time. You think of people like Jim Lee, you think of Todd McFarlane, you think of Rob Liefeld, and those were people that I knew from Marvel titles. So I sort of felt like they were the ones who chased me off. So when I went back, I checked out the other company.
Okay.
And I don't mean that to be disparaging to any of those creators. It's just that's who I associated with that era in comics.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Jim Lee. So I totally missed. I was aware of his popularity on X-Men, but I was not reading hardly any Marvel comics until actually just recently. So I read a bunch of Marvel stuff when I was younger, going this is the mid to late 80s, and then I pretty much didn't read any Marvel comics except for Bendis's and Malev's Daredevil run, but I got those in trades, kind of like you. I was starting to catch up on things that had come out in the late 90s and the 2000s by reading a bunch of trades. But I didn't really get into or was exposed to Jim Lee's stuff until he moved over to DC, doing DC stuff. So it's just funny how that works out.
So you never read any of the early Wildcats or any of that kind of stuff?
No. See, I was aware of what was going on with Image, and my friend Greg, who he's an artist. He went to school and to learn and refine his comic book artistry skills. So he knew all that stuff. But one, I couldn't afford all these books back then. I could only buy 3, maybe 4 titles a month back when Image was getting going. Right. So I was getting New Teen Titans and Legion of Superheroes and some other things, and that was pretty much it.
Those are great choices, though. I mean, those are solid as a rock right there.
Yeah. But so I missed all that Image stuff and everything that you were talking about earlier. And like I said, I came back into it, getting introduced to some of these artists and these writers that came out of that time period. But it's that whole 90s issue, like you said, that almost destroyed comics. And well, I guess it depends on who you talk to, but I kind of think if things had gone just a little more badly, we wouldn't be here talking about comic books and the movies especially.
And as much as I'm bitter about that whole era and the early days of Image. I mean, Image is now my favorite comic book publisher. So things come around.
Isn't that funny? Me too.
If it weren't for Spawn, we wouldn't have The Walking Dead or Invincible. So
yeah, or any the things that are coming out now like Saga and
right, exactly.
What's the one, Lazarus? I'm really loving that right now. So
yeah, Greg Rucka, he's the man.
So are you reading any of the new Marvel Now stuff?
Superior Spider-Man, you've got to read that. Well, it's wrapping up, so I guess if you haven't read it, go back and get the trades. Hawkeye's been real interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't. One thing that I feel bad about is I haven't followed Daredevil, and it's just, by all reports, been unbelievably good.
Oh, Bruce, you really should go check out those trades at least, because Mark Waid and Paulo Rivera started it, and then Chris Samney took over on the art, and it's just, that book has been going on now for just over 3 years, and it's been phenomenal. Every issue has been fantastic.
But the last time, talking about jumping on points and jumping off points, as far as my heavy Marvel reading after AVX, the Avengers versus X-Men, I kind of gave myself a little vacation from my regular monthly Marvel reads. Now I'm kind of picking up trades here and there, with the exception of just really eye-catching things like Hawkeye and Superior Spider-Man.
Yeah. Are you excited about the Amazing Spider-Man that's coming out soon?
I was not at all excited about Superior Spider-Man. Slott's a great writer. I don't know why I didn't give him the benefit of the doubt, but I was not at all excited about Superior Spider-Man, and it turned out to be one of the coolest things in comics in a while.
Yeah.
And now I'm not that excited about Amazing Spider-Man coming back, so I'll just have to wait and see. It's like I was one of I wasn't one of the worst complainers out there, but I was not sure that I liked the idea of Superior Spider-Man. Mm-hmm. And now that they've warmed me up to the idea, why are they undoing it? But why they've got to undo it. But this can't go on for perpetuity. We're not going to have 25 years of Superior Spider-Man. We knew it was going to come. I expected it to only last a year. So
me too.
Yeah, 2 years is pretty good. But not too excited about it. I don't know. Not too excited. Probably more excited about Miles Morales, to put things in perspective. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah. And okay, so let's talk about independence just briefly here. What are the books that you're reading now that have got you excited?
Well, geez, this is where a lot of the excitement is in comics. And one nice thing about independence is there's always something. There's always a number one every week, so there's always something to jump onto. Particularly if you start to get overwhelmed, you're like, man, I'm 6 months behind on I'm 6 months behind on Superman. I'm 6 months behind on Detective Comics. It's kind of rough to go in there and try to get caught up, but you can always find an indie number one. Having said that, probably, I mean, everybody loves Saga. It's not fair to call that an indie book, but I'll just throw that out there. But for me, for me personally, there's a trilogy that came out that was kind of under the radar, found it by accident or what. It was one of those where it's a number one. I'll just see if I like it or not. But it's a 3-part series called Burn the Orphanage, the Born to Lose trilogy or something like that. And it's a really cool story. It's got a lot of throwback to some 80s movie themes. It approaches some social commentary on marriage equality and things like that from a perspective you don't see a whole lot in comics. It also, deals with the idea these are orphans, these are adult orphans. They were orphans as a child also, but this is what happens to them when they're adults and they're kind of, their own makeshift family. It's just different and interesting. And I always like things that are different and interesting. I read the first few issues of Sex Criminals until my wife saw the covers and said I couldn't read those anymore. Which is, unfortunate because Matt Fraction used to work at what was once my old local comic book shop, but that was
no kidding.
Not at the same time that I was going there. Yeah, but there's a huge comic book store in Charlotte, North Carolina, where Matt Fraction used to help people buy their comics once upon a time.
Wow.
So I like that. I really, I was really into Thief of Thieves a couple years ago. That's sort of waned a little bit. I'm trying to think what are some of the other good ones. I like Dayman. I don't know if you follow that. I think that's either Dynamite or Boom, so it's a little bit further off the beaten path since it's not Image. East of West is good.
Mm-hmm.
Rat Queens is good. And then you're always making good recommendations that I wish I would follow up on. Like, is it Danger Club?
Yeah.
I haven't followed up on that yet. I hear you talk about some books that I really need to read and I haven't gotten around to yet. But yeah, my favorite indie, and sometimes there's a bit of a hipster attitude. You really take special pride in finding something other people haven't found. And I try not to be that way, but Burn the Orphanage has been my recent treasure that I found unexpectedly that I really liked. Oh, Todd the Ugliest Kid on Earth. That's a fun one. It's definitely adults only, but it's a fun one to read too.
So who puts out the Burn the Orphanage book?
Well, it's released by Image, I'm pretty sure. It's released by Image, but it's not like wide release. It's not one of those that, gets a initial print run of 25,000 or anything.
Huh, yeah, because I don't recognize that at all. So apparently I missed it.
It's on Comixology as well. I think I read issue 1 on Comixology, then I picked up 2 and 3 in print. So now the real challenge is how do you go find issue 1 of that in print since it's not a common title, but that'll give me a challenge for the next couple of years. But yeah, that's the real, kind of diamond that I found. I enjoyed Sidekick. Did you read Sidekick when it came out? Issue 1.
No.
That was another one I'm pretty sure was through Image. And, I'm blanking on the writer now too. But
isn't that Straczynski that did the
Sidekick
one?
Yes, that's it. JMS. But it's a nice deconstruction of the hero. Watchmen is one of the most influential comic books of all time. It's one of those things that helped lead me back onto the right path when I started reading comics again. So I always love those stories that deconstruct the hero. And Sidekick, of course, was one of those.
See, now on Sidekick, I read the description of it, and I just did not care for the kind of, I don't know, the bad construction towards sidekicks, because I recommend highly to anyone Danger Club, which is about sidekicks, and my favorite character of all time is Robin, who's a sidekick. So I have this special connection to or just an affection for sidekick characters. So when you deconstruct the sidekick character in a negative fashion, and this is totally my perception of the solicitation text for Sidekick. Right. So it turned me off, and I never gave it a chance. So are you telling me I should give it a chance?
I'm telling you that it's not what you think.
Okay.
It treats the hero just as poorly as it treats the sidekick. I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who hasn't read it. I mean, I can't say more about that. I will say that it's 18 and over. So
okay.
if that's going to bother you, then for listeners that are going to be bothered by dealing with professional women, if you catch my drift, uh, that and it's got some humor in it though.
Okay.
So I think you should probably check out issue 1, and by the end of issue 1, you'll know if you want to read on or not.
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
read Trillium, by the way? That's another indie book that just popped into my head that I really liked. I really like the mini series because I know I'm not going to get roped in for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's
And
good.
Trillium was a really good one.
Yeah, that's one I actually was going to wait for the trade, mostly because I really liked the idea of it. I like the story idea of it. But that's the one by Jeff Lemire, right?
Oh, absolutely. He did the writing and the art.
Yeah.
And
See, I'm not a big fan of his art.
well, I I was going to say that when I read issue 1, I reviewed it on a podcast for some friends of mine, and the very first thing I said was, I read it and I really liked the story, but I wasn't crazy about the art, and I wanted to see who did the art. And when I realized it was the same person that did both, I felt kind of bad for saying that. But yeah, I agree with you that his art is not for everyone.
No, yeah.
It's probably not my style, but the story's good. If you do wait for it in trade, one thing I'll say is I do encourage you to get issue 1 in the single issue, even if you just borrow it from someone, because it's a double issue that's like one of those flip issues like you get on Free Comic Book Day.
Yeah.
Where it's like halfway through, you think you're at the end, then all of a sudden everything's upside down, and you turn it and you start reading from the other direction.
Yeah, I heard
And it's
about
really,
that. Mhm.
yeah, it's really interesting that way because there are 2 stories and it's ambiguous as to where you're supposed to begin. And it kind of feels different if you begin one way than if you begin the other.
Oh, okay.
So, even if you just, heck, you don't even have to borrow it. Just sneak it into the John at your comic book store and read it or something. That's a good one.
Yeah, the comic book store I go to, they frown on people using the bathroom. Period. So I probably am hard pressed to let them let me use the bathroom for that purpose.
I'm pretty sure that my store doesn't have a bathroom, but the guy that owns it's actually named John, so that joke works.
The jokes write themselves.
Yeah.
So you mentioned reading some stuff digitally from Comixology, but based on what you've been saying, I assume that you're mostly a print reader. Is that correct?
I really like print. My wife really likes digital because it doesn't take up as much room in the increasingly smaller houses that we've been living in. But no, there's something to be said for convenience. Sometimes with the indie stuff, it's easier for me to get it on Comixology than it is at my local store.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes something will be sold out. Sometimes I just get in the mood to read something at on a Sunday at 9 p.m. So I'll get on Comixology, and I do like the convenience, but I also really like the possession. With Comixology, you don't really own anything. It's like watching a video on YouTube. If your computer dies, then so does your story. But
yeah,
I love this. I love the service though. It helps. It makes it accessible. Especially like one of the listeners who has emailed me a few times from my show. He lives in Panama. He's in a remote area of Panama. He doesn't even get his mail on a regular basis, but he does have a good internet connection, so he can listen to podcasts. He can read Comixology. I'm glad that there's things like that for folks. The town I lived in growing up, if I'd had something like Comixology, I probably would have read a lot more than I do now.
Yeah.
Actually, knowing me, then I would have probably read them illegally through a BitTorrent site or something. But you catch my drift. So I like it that Comixology is there, but I also just I love right here where I record, I've got this bookshelf full of trades, and I just love looking over and seeing those trades on the shelf. I love when I've got a lazy afternoon to just bag and board and box up single issues. I love to dig through and see what I've forgotten to read. Go through, find some old things, and I think, gee, I ought to frame those and put them up on the wall, stuff like that. So it is, at the end of the day, comics are art, and I think art works well when it's physical and not solely digital.
Yeah. I use Comixology mostly to at the beginning of it, I would look for their sales. They're basically their 99-cent sales, and then I would go and find storylines of particular comics that I had heard of but had not read, and so that I could go back and read those old stories and catch up on those events. So that was really nice.
And it was good. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but it was good for like Batman Incorporated #8 when Damian died.
Oh yeah,
that thing was gone as soon as the comic book store opened. It was gone. I mean, everybody came in, bought their copies, and then it was gone. So Comixology let me read that right away, and I didn't have to wait till John reordered a copy for me and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's another good use of that service. Plus, I also got this was a while ago, months ago, I want to say, several months ago, when Marvel they had a special thing where you could sign up for their initial release of a huge backlog that they had, so you could get like issue one or like the first couple issues of a lot of different titles, and there were like hundreds of issues that you could choose from, and so I was able to get in on that before they cut it off.
Did they crash Comixology when
they
did that?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to wait a day. I got access to it, but I had to wait a day or two before I could actually download the files. But I was able to get a huge amount of Marvel comics that I would never have read if not for that.
What do you think about Marvel's new sort of subscription-based service where it's like a Netflix model where you can read as much you want for one monthly fee? You pay, I don't remember if it's $10 a month or what it is, but you pay your monthly fee, and they've got, not their most current titles, but they've got a ton of back titles that you can just go and read nonstop. You could read everything in 1 month if you just wanted to sit there and read it, and it would only cost you $10 or whatever the cost is. Are you familiar with that service?
Yeah, and I actually would subscribe if I already wasn't so far behind in the print material that I buy every month.
See, that's where I think digital would work, as if there was more of a Netflix type thing where I could use it as an excuse to read things I wouldn't normally buy individually. I mean, with Netflix, I watch a lot of television shows and movies that maybe I wouldn't watch otherwise. And I think that if there was sort of a digital service where I could not have to pay the same thing I would pay for a physical copy, and I could go and find what I like, and then a lot of the things that I like, I would probably start to buy either physical single issues or more likely trades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So have you heard about the news that the Amazon has bought Comixology?
I've heard I've heard quite a bit about it, but I'm not sure what to make of it yet.
Yeah, and they just as we record this, Bruce, this is what day is this? This is April 26th. So apparently Comixology released they're releasing or had released, I can't remember now, new apps. Basically, for the iOS side of Comixology, you have to go to the Comixology website to buy your books and then download them to your iOS device. I'm not sure about the Android side, but I know a lot of people were very excited about this change, and not necessarily in a positive way.
Yeah, I haven't, since the change happened, I haven't been to Comixology on my iPad, so I don't know how that's going to work.
Yeah, I think you will not like the result of that. But
well, one positive, though, as a podcaster, and not so much for myself, but for other podcasters with similar shows, is Amazon currently has sort of a partnership agreement where you put the Amazon link on your website, and if people click through and buy things from Amazon, your show gets a small portion of that. And it would be awesome if I could put a Comixology link and, like I talked about Alan Scott, here are some books that I recommend you read. And if people wanted to click on the link and purchase that from Comixology, if they would give me like a quarter of a cent, like 0.25 cents or something, that would be just, kind of nice, because by the time I die, I could go buy a soda or something.
That's actually a very good idea. I hope they do that. That's excellent. And I will ask for them to give me that affiliate link.
Because with your show, I would have read Danger Club by now if I could just click on your website and read it directly. And then, you could have gotten a fraction of a cent from that. And then Comixology would have gotten some money that they didn't get, because I don't want to go through the trouble of trying to remember exactly what it was called. I thought it was called Boys Club for a little while. So that's part of why I couldn't find it.
Well, the problem with Danger Club is that, it came out with 5 issues. Yeah, I think that's it. 5 issues. And because of various goings on with the creative team, they haven't gone back to it. So sometimes I have problems remembering the title of the book that I love so much because it's been so long.
Well, Not to try to commandeer your show, should we talk about Emerald City before it gets too late?
Yes, I'm sorry about that. I get talking and lose
Me
track
too.
of
Me
time.
too.
So, and I know it's late for you, so I apologize
Yeah,
about that. Yeah,
that's
so
all right.
let's transition to Emerald City Comic Con. So, I was really excited, Bruce, when I think I was on Twitter and I mentioned something about Emerald City, and you contacted me. So, are you going to be there? And I'm like, yeah. And I said, are you going to be there? And so we were supposed to meet up in Seattle, and it never worked out.
Well, the problem is, well, one of the many problems, but they squeeze 60,000 people into the convention center there, and they're all trying to access the same internet feed from the local cell towers or whatever.
Yeah.
And Twitter was just unreliable, because I know you had sent me messages that I got like 4 hours after you sent them, and
Yes.
vice versa.
Yep.
So that was a big part of the problem there. And also, I didn't go on Saturday. I don't think you were there on Friday. Were you there on Friday?
I was there for a few hours on Friday.
I did Friday, Sunday, and I didn't do Saturday just because I thought that would be the most crowded, most difficult time.
Oh yeah.
So that takes one day completely out of the schedule to try to meet people, and then I'd made plans ahead of time to meet a couple friends of mine, one from San Jose area in California, one guy from Portland, and then another guy that actually lived in Seattle. Made plans to meet up with him. So lots of plans. And as has been my experience with other cons that I go to, 75% of them fall through, So I did well. I managed to meet 2 out of the 4 people that I wanted to meet up with.
Good.
So that worked out. But it was a great convention, wasn't it?
Yeah. So was this your first time to Emerald City?
My very first time.
And what was it about going to Emerald City that caused you to come out to Seattle?
Well,
But that's a long way for you to go.
It is a long way. I went to Portland in the fall.
Oh.
Just because I had a friend who lived out there in Oregon, and loved the Northwest and thought it would be a good destination. And by all accounts, Emerald City is kind of the cool con to go to. I mean, San Diego is just so overblown and impossible to get tickets to. And I just had really heard time and time again that Emerald City is kind of the cool convention to go to if you want to go to a bigger convention.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd wanted to go for a couple of years, and I had the finances to go this year. So I pulled the trigger on it, and it was a blast. But I had wanted to go for a while. I mean, I'd been hearing, San Diego's just like going to Disneyland on Easter weekend or something. It's just not much fun because of the crowd.
Yeah.
And that Emerald City was big enough to really have a lot of cool stuff, but it was still small enough that you weren't going to be overwhelmed. But it was pretty big this year.
Yeah.
64,000 folks a day for 3 days. So,
Mm-hmm.
and they could have sold more tickets if they hadn't capped it.
Yeah, exactly. So what were the highlights of the show for you?
Well, to be honest, I mean, with any convention, my favorite thing's just being around other people who like the same stuff. You know what I mean? It's not any of the individual exhibitors or any of the individual artists that are there that really are the reason I go. I go there just to be around other folks that like the same thing. But I did have a few highlights. The first thing I did on Friday, and I was there pretty much when the doors opened on Friday, and I went straight to Jeff Smith. The creator of Bone.
Mm-hmm.
Big fan of his, which is funny. He lives maybe 2.5 hours from where I live, but I could never see him there, so I had to go to Seattle to see him. And my daughter's 8 years old, and I've introduced her to Jeff Smith's Bone. She's been reading the 1-volume collection, and they had some of those Scholastic one-shots there, and I got him to draw a little sketch inside of one of those books and sign it out to my daughter and talk to him for a little bit, because I know the town that I know the high school where he went to high school and stuff like that. So we had a brief chat. I mean, he's one of the nicest guys. He would have talked to me as long as I wanted to talk, but there was a long line behind me, and I wanted to be polite. But he was taking pictures with anyone who asked. I mean, he had no trouble drawing the little sketch for my daughter inside the front of the book. Super nice guy. So that was a personal highlight to me. One of the friends who met me up there, he's a big Scrooge McDuck fan. So they had one of the old classic artists of Scrooge McDuck there, and he got to go meet him. And he was a little bit on the cantankerous side, but that was another highlight. and probably my personal favorite thing that happened at the convention, I went to the DC All Access panel, and it was a standing room only panel. The seats were all full, and they had Scott Snyder and the guy from Fables. I mean, they had their A-list lineup up there, and then there was an empty seat where Lemire was supposed to be sitting. And the guy that does the DC All Access YouTube show or whatever, he's hosting the panel. And about 20 minutes into what's supposed to be a 50-minute panel, I'm sitting a little bit closer to the back, and I hear the volunteer at the door say, "I'm sorry, the room's full. You can't come in." And I hear these two guys are saying, "No, you don't understand. We've got to get in." And she's like, "I'm sorry, you can't come in." And then they just run past her, and I look, and it's Dan Didio and Jeff Lemire, like rushing past the security guard to get up there to the panel. So I thought that was great. And that's one of those things that it's just, as long as I live, I'm always going to remember seeing a poor high school, college age volunteer trying to keep Dan Didio out of a DC panel.
Wait a minute. Was that, Bruce, do you remember, was that panel in the afternoon on Friday?
Yeah.
You know what?
Afternoon on Friday.
I was there too. Son of a gun.
And then after I left the panel, I actually ran into one of my listeners who saw that I was at the panel. So that's funny. If I had looked around a little bit harder, maybe I would have seen you. But it was crowded.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So how much of the so you talked about how you met some of the like Jeff Smith and the creators that are there. So and you went to the panel. So were you like for me, I mostly go to the panels and find out stuff that's coming out and hear the creators talk about the stuff that they're working on, and then primarily I'm there to do some shopping.
Yes,
because I want to buy those back issues. So is that something that you're into when you go to a con, or?
It's something I'm very much into at Emerald City. I mean, I'm dealing with the flight. If I were driving, I could shop a little bit more. So since I'm flying, mostly I'm buying gifts for the kids. Don't get a whole lot for myself. But when I go, there's a huge comic book convention. When I say huge, I mean, it's not as big as Emerald City, but it's one of the 15 best attended cons that we have here right now, and it's in Charlotte, and it's entirely comic books. No celebrities, no movie stuff, no pop culture. I mean, it's entirely comic books. And when I go there, I'm traveling by car, and I mean, I take an empty backpack all 3 days, and I load the backpack up, and I'll have a bag in each hand, and I'll buy silly stuff sometimes. I mean, who knows what I'm going to buy, but I'll go through sometimes the dollar bins, the quarter bins, and I'll just grab stuff that looks interesting. I'll have things that I'm looking for, but a lot of times I'm just grabbing stuff. There'll be some ultra indie self-published guy that's working like a carnival barker trying to get you to buy his book, and I'll be curious and I'll pick it up, things like that. So I'll definitely pick up a lot when I have that option. When I'm flying, I have to be a little bit more careful, or else try to buy things that are small.
Mm-hmm.
So the smaller they are, the more expensive they can be, though, unfortunately.
That's right. Yeah.
But I always pick something up. I always pick up a book or two.
So any gems that you picked up at Emerald City?
The best thing I probably got was, like I said, the bone that I got Jeff Smith to sketch in and things as a gift for my daughter. Guy I was with got a really, really nice, like Scrooge McDuck family tree that had, all the different cousins and everything on there. And then the artist, and I apologize, I can't remember his name at the moment, but the artist actually put my friend's last name behind all of them as if it was like his own family tree.
Oh,
and
that's cool.
Wrote my friend's name in under one of the nephews or something like that. And that was a really nice thing for him to get. Another person I was with picked up his Kickstarter books that he had purchased from Greg Rucka, and, got Rucka to sign all those. And we got ElfQuest signatures on just some little signature cards, because that's something that's, I can stick in my backpack and it's not going to take up any space on the carry-on. But I saw a lot of things I would have liked to have managed to get. I just didn't work out for me.
Yeah.
Because of the travel restrictions.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, the first time we went to Emerald City, we flew out too, and we ended up putting comics in suitcases and in bags as carry-ons, and yeah, it was not the best. I was really worried about the stuff that we put in the suitcases. But since then, the second year on, I think this is our 4th or 5th year going to Emerald City, we drive out. It really is more economically suitable to do so from where we live than to fly out there now.
Yes, I mean, I wish, a lot of times I wish I lived closer to the West Coast, just because there's a lot more of that sort of thing going on. But, we live where we live. We got to make the most of it, I suppose.
Yeah.
And my wife's a big Walking Dead fan, so her highlight is, she got her picture taken. You can do the thing where you pay however many dollars to get your picture taken, and she got one with Tyrese and Beth, or the actor and actress that portray Tyrese and Beth at the same time. So it's like three people in the picture, and then she got it autographed, and she got a big kick out of that.
Cool. That's great. So it was just you and your wife that came out?
Yeah, my wife and I came out, and then a friend of mine that lives in Portland met us on Sunday, and we actually met us Saturday evening. He stayed at the same hotel we did, and a common friend of ours who lives in San Jose also, he flew to Portland and then hitched a ride from Portland on up. So on Sunday there were four of us, and on Friday it was just my wife and I.
Oh, great. So it is. What does your wife enjoy about the show besides meeting the Walking Dead actors?
Well, she likes the celebrities as a whole. That's why she doesn't like to go to the Charlotte convention very much. I prefer it because it's totally focused on comic books. But she likes the celebrity stuff. She went to the Ron Perlman panel and heard him talk. She's a Sons of Anarchy fan, so she got a kick out of that, and heard him talking about Pacific Rim 2 and Hellboy 3, which I don't know if he knew what he was talking about or not, but I'm excited about Hellboy. And, she, believe it or not, she went with me to a Dwight Schultz panel, which, I'm an old A-Team fan, and I'm not sure she knew who he was, but that was fun. And she liked the celebrity stuff more.
Yeah, my wife is very much the same. She's never gotten into comics other than, it's funny you mentioned Jeff Smith and Bone. That's the only comic that I've gotten her to read all the way through. So that was she. I know she wanted to meet Jeff Smith. I don't know that she actually got to do it. So we'll have to go back when he's around. But yeah, she likes the celebrity stuff too.
And when you go to an amusement park, you kind of want to go straight to the big ride first sometimes, because if you don't, the line's going to be bad all day long. And Jeff Smith was one of those. As soon as I got through the door, I knew to go there because, there were people with bone tattoos that wanted to get their pictures taken. Some lady made him a cupcake that was adorned with phone bone on the top of it and stuff like that. So he is a super popular creator. I don't think a lot of people realize it, but, a lot of his popularity comes from the fact that Bone was sold at a lot of book fairs in middle schools and elementary schools, and he is one of those people that has broad appeal outside of just your core comic book fans. And he's also just so super nice. If you meet him once, you're going to be a fan for life.
Yeah,
it's like Greg Rucka. I compare Greg Rucka to Jeff Smith in that way. I mean, Greg Rucka's books are really good books, but once you meet him in person and see just how nice he is, they become super great books. He's just very accessible.
Yeah. So do you have any plans of going to the Portland show again this year?
I have 100% plan to go in September. That's twice a year if I can make it out to the Northwest. We like to travel while we're there. I went out and actually saw the state of Washington a little bit. When I went to Portland, I went to the con, and my wife drove up into Washington. It's beautiful up there.
Yeah.
And I plan to go to Rose City again in September, as long as financial things work out and that sort of thing.
Oh, good. Excellent. We plan to be there as well. It'll be our first time at Rose City. But I'm hoping we can swing it.
From what I understand, right now, Rose City is what Emerald City used to be before it just got super crazy popular.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really why I'm excited to go, because Emerald City is getting a little too big for my taste these last couple years.
And I'm, tickets, you had to get your tickets pretty early this year. And I'm worried that next year it's almost going to be a San Diego situation where they go on sale and, 2 hours later they're sold out.
Yeah.
That's one thing I'm worried about, is just even being able to go. But Portland's fun.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to that. And hopefully, Bruce, you and I can actually get together and meet in person. That would be really awesome.
Yeah, Portland would be a lot easier place to find someone than, even when you're in the same room, you don't know it there. That's at right. Emerald City.
All right. Well, Bruce, I know I've kept you up really late. I apologize about that, but it's been so much fun talking with you about all this stuff.
And it's been my pleasure. I've had a blast. Part of why we've been up so late is I've just had so much to say, because I've really enjoyed talking to you as well.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. Why don't you please remind everyone about your podcast, Heroes and Villains, and where they can find you and how to contact you and all that great stuff.
Well, it's heroesandvillains.libsyn.com, heroesandvillains.libsyn.com. And, of course, it's on iTunes. If you just search Heroes and, it'll pop up. Also, you can follow me on Twitter at HV Podcast. Go to the website, heroesandvillains.libsyn.com, and I'll have links to the Omega Nerds Network, links to my Twitter, and I'll have my email address listed there as well. And I'll also have links that pertain to any guests that I may have on. So you can find it all pretty much at that spot, heroesandvillains.libsyn.com.
Excellent. Bruce, thank you so much for, one, inviting me onto your show, and two, for agreeing to appear on this episode. I hope that you can come back again some other time, and we'll talk comics and whatever else we happen to want to talk about.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Eric.
All right, that's it, everybody. Go listen to Bruce's Heroes and Villains podcast. It's a lot of fun. And send any comments or feedback to longboxreview@gmail.com. Or you can leave feedback at the blog at longboxreview.wordpress.com. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye, Bruce.
See you later.